Hello. I haven't done a video like this in a long time, where I'm just painting and kind of chatting with you. And this one might be kind of weird since I don't have the whole process recorded, but I wanted to share it anyways. This is my 2021 self-portrait that I've just now finished. Normally I do one of these every December. I like to see how my painting style has changed and my hair is always different, which is cool. I think it's interesting to see them all together. But I never finished this one when I started it. I think I had a lot going on at the time and then just never came back to it. So it's a couple years late, but I'm really glad I finally finished it. Since I had already mostly finished the face, sorry if that's your favorite part to watch. If you're interested, I will post the progress photos I have on Instagram. But since I had already mostly finished the face, I started on the hair, which I think really started to bring out some of the greens and the skin. I think it's so interesting to see how the colors change as you add new colors next to them. I left all these parts in real time, so you could really see the process. For hair, I mainly break it down into 4 colors to work with. First, obviously, there's shadow, midtone, and highlight. Then I like to add another color that's more of an overlay in some areas. Since my hair is green here, I use lemon yellow for that. If I was doing brown hair, I might have used like red or maybe even purple. For black hair, blue is always good. So first I lay down the base. It's mostly a mid-tone, but I also like to start adding a little bit of the shadow just to get a general idea of the shape of the hair for later. But since I'll be going over all of this, I try to keep it simple. The most important part is just covering the paper with a color that is close to what I want, so it's easy to add details on top of it later. Painting short hair like this is pretty difficult for me, and I'm also not super comfortable with working with greens. It's something I normally try to avoid. So I'm taking it pretty slow and trying to focus on the bigger shapes and the direction of the hair, but in shorter lines than I would normally use for longer hair. I always get paint all over my arm whenever I include my palette in the shot. There is not really a better spot for it unless I want to like reach over my painting, and that can make sped up parts really flashy and kind of uncomfortable to watch. So I always end up putting my arm in wet paint, but I guess it washes off easily, so it's fine. Watching this back, I feel like I definitely could have used a bigger brush for this part, but I tend to use a smaller brush when I'm nervous about what I'm working on. But I really do enjoy working on the first layers of paintings. I feel like they have something that I tend to lose later in the process. I think someday I'll have to let go of my need to perfect everything and leave a painting somewhat unfinished. I would love to have a little bit more looseness in my work, but it's really hard to let go of that control. While that's drying, I'll go ahead and get started on the shirt before we work on the hair again later. Since the shirt is dark, I'm starting with the darkest parts first, so I don't lose my lines later. Next, I fill everything in with the mid-tone. Since it's a black shirt, this color is pretty dark, but it did end up drying lighter than I wanted it to, so I ended up darkening it up a little bit later. Now for the fun part of the hair, I like to work in sections for this so it doesn't get overwhelming. This is where I start refining some of the shapes. I like to use 2 brushes for this so I can switch between highlights and shadows quickly. If you've ever had to do a ribbon study in school, this is basically the same concept. All the brush stroke should follow the flow of the hair you're painting. I'm using the darker color to lay out the shape and any overlapping hairs, then the midtone to go over everything else, then lastly using highlights only in the middle or the highest point. In my reference, my hair is pretty greasy, so there's a lot of highlights, but if the highlights are too bright, you can lightly blend over everything to get a softer look. Just use a barely damp brush, like almost dry. If it's too wet, you'll just end up picking up too much paint, and then just very lightly brush over the area, still following the direction of the hair, and it'll blend everything out. When I do this, I usually end up having to go back in to add more contrast, so be careful not to overblend. For the highlights, or even after, depending on what you're going for, is when I add the overlay of yellow. I just have a tiny amount of super watered down yellow on my brush, and I'm just brushing it over certain areas to add a little bit more variety. If you do it over your highlights, it'll change the color of them and make them stand out less. Normally I have a really hard time with short, messy hair. It can be really hard to paint well, but I'm really happy with how it came out this time. Next, I really quickly did a darker wash over the shirt, and to add a little bit of texture, I used a lining brush and just kind of brushed over it following the direction of the shirt. I did this vertically, but horizontally probably would have looked pretty cool too. And after that, I added a few highlights with the same brush and did a quick blend over everything, so the texture is still there but not so much in your face. Then all that was left was the finishing details and refining. Honestly, this took a lot longer than it looks like. I started with cleaning up some of the lines that I might have covered at some point, and then also darkening up some of the shadows on my face. My reference was taken in harsh overhead lights, so the shadows should be pretty extreme, and the dark shirt really lowered the contrast. Next, I went on working over the bottom of the face. The paint was a little thin here, and I felt like I could make it look a little bit nicer, so it was a lot of add shadow, add highlight, then blend with watered down midtone over and over again until I got everything how I wanted, and also more smooth. I feel like the brush strokes that were there before were really pulling my face down. Then I darkened the neck shadow, and I really didn't do much there. I wanted to keep most of the detail on the face. Then I started on the small details like the jewelry and my glasses. Glasses are so scary because they can make the whole face look weird if you do it wrong, so that part was a little stressful. I was using a tiny lining brush for lining the frames, and I think it came out okay. Next was finishing the jewelry. I think chains can be really hard because I never know how much detail I should do so that it reads well but isn't distracting. Then for the last part of the face, I added on the eyebrows. I always try to leave them as long as I can because they're pretty hard to paint around if you want to change anything. For details, it's really just a lot of jumping around the painting, fixing stuff, waiting for other areas to dry, noticing new things that need fixing until you're finally happy or just get tired of looking at it. I did end up adding a little bit more yellow to the hair and a few eyelashes. Then I decided I was done. It was really nice to work on this for the last couple of days, and now I need to decide if I should try and do one for 2022 or not. I do think it would be nice to not be missing one in the series, but at the same time I'm not sure I even really look that much different, and I don't know. Let me know if you think I should do it or just skip it. I'll see you guys soon for the next video. Bye.